the organic material is in the mortar, and the mortar goes all the way down the bottom layers of the pyramid, in the core of the pyramid, and that mortar carbon dates to exactly of Khufu.
He's literally talking out of his ass right now.
He misrepresents it. Your paper that you showed had nothing to do with the pyramids.
Nothing to do with the pyramids.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So you just heard it from Flint Dibble himself. The paper that Gnostics cited in the debate with DeDunking, Dan Richards, on Matt Beall's podcast about ancient history and all this stuff was not about the pyramids. So what was it about? Because in this video, I'm going to show you what Gnostic and Flint Dibble said when Gnostic Informant went on to Flint Dibble's show after the debate with DeDunking. So we're going to look at what he said and if the data aligns with what they're saying or what the researchers like me are looking into. Let's go.
Mortar goes all the way down in the core of the pyramid, and that mortar carbon dates to exactly the reign of Khufu.
No, it does not.
Yes, it does. Dan is being confidently wrong here. Some of it is based off of outdated literature. Some of it is based off of him just lying. I love how he goes, no, it does not, immediately. Like he's an idiot.
Only the wood.
No.
Not the mortar.
The
mortar is, it's right.
You're a little wrong here too.
Gnostic was citing a paper, this one right here, that Flint Dibble showed him to bring up on the debate. And what does it say? Resolution of the high versus low debate for Old and Middle Kingdom Egypt. Now they read the abstract on the debate and they read the abstract on Flint Dibble's show. Now in the debate, Gnostic wrote a little thing on the side saying it's the mortar that they dated. That is not what this paper says, as I showed in my previous video breaking down this whole debate for like nearly 3 hours. But on this show, they brought up this paper. Gnostic cites, as he just said,
mortar goes all the way down in the core of the pyramid, and that mortar carbon dates to exactly the reign of Khufu.
So he's talking about mortar in the core of the pyramids. That's what Gnostic said. That's what they're dating. However, this paper that he brought up to cite that Flint Dibble gave him says nothing about that. And then what happens? Flint on his show brings up a separate paper and study that is completely different to what Gnostic is citing. So he is completely misrepresenting the evidence on this podcast.
Dan is being confidently wrong here. Some of it is based off of outdated literature.
Oh, how convenient. It's based on outdated literature. Well, why don't we get some updated literature and carbon dating from the Great Pyramid from an archaeologist? Who? Mark Lehner. Zahi Hawass, the top Egyptologist in the world. His right-hand man is Mark Lehner. So this is as mainstream as you can get that I'm going to bring you this information to show if these guys are telling the truth, which we all know they're not. They're just lying. They're doing this. They're misrepresenting the data while saying Dan, who's sitting over there on the podcast, is misrepresenting the data and lying. These guys are the worst projectionists I've ever seen. Actually, Gnostic isn't as bad as Flint because Flint gives him the information to put on the podcast, whereas Gnostic's just a useful idiot on this podcast, and Flint gave him all the data that was incorrect. And they admitted it openly on this podcast. Like, what the
of it is based off of him just lying. I love how he goes, no, it does not, immediately. Like he's an idiot.
So this was the paper that Gnostic cited. Now I'm going to show you the information that he was actually citing because Flint gave him this data from a reanalysis of the chronological discrepancies obtained by the Old and Middle Kingdom Monuments Project, January 2011. So I looked at this because I saw this table that Flint brought up on his channel when they were talking about it. I'm like, where is he getting this from? He overlaid it on top of the abstract because as I showed in my previous video on the breakdown, if you go to table 1, which I'll show you, it has nothing to do with this and the radiocarbon dating of the mortar in the pyramid because this is what he was actually citing, Gnostic, in the debate. He was talking about samples of charcoal, which includes grass and twigs as well as wood. The charcoal came in the form of fragments extracted from the mortar found between stone blocks. It doesn't say they were in the core of the pyramid. Now Flint says they weren't in the limestone outer casings, they were on some inner casings. But it doesn't mean they were from the core. That's not what this says. Because it says in the original study, almost 80% of the dates were made on wood or charcoal. This number rises to 89% for the 158 dates from the 4th dynasty when they say the Great Pyramid was built by Khufu. And then they talk about the tree rings. Now he was trying to quote the tree rings from this study when I showed that the tree rings in the actual study that they're citing have nothing to do with that. It's from Sudan. So he's misrepresenting the data on a podcast while Flint is sitting there claiming that Dan is misrepresenting data. And it says, moreover, all carbon-14 measurements made on charcoal retain a bias to older ages, which typically reflects the age of the wood. So they're saying the wood is older because this is what Flint Dibble brought up. And he overlaid it over the abstract of this paper because he didn't want to cite the actual research from this paper. So he pulled this up. This is a comparison from 2001 of calibrated C14 dates, and you can see Khufu here in the middle. It's off by a couple of hundred years. That's what they're saying. It's only off by a couple of hundred years, not thousands of years from this study. But as you hear next, Gnostic was actually wrong.
Only the wood,
No.
not the mortar. The mortar it's right.
You're a little wrong here too.
Even Flint says you're a little wrong. And how was he wrong?
Yeah, I was going to say the mortar has wood and it has other material in it, but is it only the mortar that's been dated? Was I wrong about that part?
There's a combo of things that have been dated. So the thing is that with the initial dating here, let me see if I can pull it up. So in the 80s and 90s, a series of radiocarbon samples from the mortar in between the blocks on the inner stones of the pyramid.
Okay, so Flint says there the 80s and 90s, these carbon dates came out. And he says the inner stones, but I just showed you they were fragments extracted from the mortar found between stone blocks. It doesn't say where they were specifically.
So these are not the outer casing stones. The outer casing stones were mostly removed. This
Right.
is like the next layer or so in, and they used this kind
Which is not what Gnostic said, down to the core of the pyramid.
of mortar, and the mortar
While citing a study that says nothing about mortar between the blocks of the pyramid.
included ash. They would burn material to help aggregate it together. And so that's what they're dating, this kind of ash that's in there. The initial publication,
He's actually going to get called out on his own stream for being wrong about that, and I'll show you.
here's the graph from it. All of these material from the Old Kingdom is dating early.
So we have early dates from the Old Kingdom, and I showed you it was about 200 years from Khufu's reign, which were 200 years older, these dates are showing.
Than what was expected, which is important because Dan lies about this later. Same thing with you go later in time.
Not
You notice how
thousands of years, though. That's very important.
Not thousands of years, that is very important, which we will get to other studies by Mike Lehner.
not thousands of
Not
years,
only
but by a
thousands of
couple
years.
hundred years.
When I posted on X under DeDunking's post, I said, hey, look at this study. This is not what he was actually citing on the podcast. This is incorrect. It's a misrepresentation. And then someone called Roderick on X posted this study. So I looked into it, and it says radiocarbon dates in early Egypt from academia.edu, academic paper, and it's from 11th of October 2025, and it's talking about the consensus on the dating of the first 6 dynasties of ancient Egypt, and we're talking about the 4th dynasty. Now, here's the abstract and the key takeaways from this study right here. The paper critiques the current consensus on the dating of the first 6 dynasties of ancient Egypt, arguing that it is based on a flawed understanding of evidence, particularly regarding radiocarbon dating. It highlights the discrepancies between popular dating estimates and existing archaeological evidence, suggesting a potential need for revising these dates significantly earlier, significantly earlier than what everyone is telling us, or the archaeologists and Egyptologists are telling us. Furthermore, it discusses the reluctance within the field to reconsider established dates due to the implications it would have on the entire chronology of Egyptian history, suggesting that the need for consensus has led to a lack of critical analysis in Egyptology. Right there tells you everything I need to know, and you need to know as someone who's looking into this and researching this. The people who are in charge of Egyptology, archaeology, are trying to protect a mainstream narrative, our agenda. And look at the key takeaways from this. Current Egyptological consensus on dating the 4th dynasty lacks substantial evidence and is highly uncertain. Calibrated radiocarbon dates suggest the 4th dynasty may be 374 years older than conventional estimates. So they were saying 100 to 200 years, Flint and Gnostic, with their evidence. The 1st dynasty starting date is debated, with some evidence suggesting it could be as early as 3600 BC. Significant discrepancies exist between calibrated carbon dates and accepted chronologies, indicating an urgent need for revision. And resistance to change in Egyptian chronology is largely due to adherence to established authorities and conventions. That's the abstract and the key takeaways. Now, we're going to look at data from Mark Lehner and his table of research of carbon dating in the Great Pyramid and what he found. And who is Mark Lehner? Mark Lehner collected carbon dating samples from the Great Pyramid in 1984 and 1994-95. Now, who is he? Mark Lehner is an American archaeologist and president of Ancient Egypt Research Associates. And Zahir was, as we've seen, lying about the data of the Sphinx water erosion, a globally recognized Egyptian archaeologist and the former Minister of State for Antiquities. They collaborated on the Sphinx and the pyramids in 2017. So these are the two top guys in archaeology and Egyptology. So I'm just going to quote his findings, which include this table right here. As you can see at the bottom, table 1, Mark Lehner's list of cement samples and their carbon dates from the various layers of the Great Pyramid. And this is from the Great Dating Problem, Part 2. We have 15 samples here in different layers of the Great Pyramid. What's the oldest dates we have? 3809 BC, plus or minus 160. So that will drop you to what, 3700 BC? That's still nearly 1,000 years before Khufu. And what did we see in my last video when I did the breakdown? They found wood in the Queen's Chamber, which also goes back to 500 to 800 years earlier. Now this charcoal, which Flint Dibble talks about dating charcoal, this is 3809 BC, plus or minus 160. So 36 or nearly 4000 BC. Then we go all the way down to 2850. That's still off from the 2500 BC. But our oldest date is 3809 and our youngest date is 2853. What have we been hearing from Flint Dibble, Gnostic Informant, all these guys that are giving us the mainstream data? Well, this dude is the most mainstream you can get. And his data suggests it's older by at least 300 here or 1300 here. Now, this speaks to me of a construction of over centuries, like I said in my debate breakdown with all the data we have, which is before seeing this table from Mark Lehner, one of the top guys in mainstream archaeology and Egyptology. Mainstream, okay? This isn't pseudoscience I'm quoting. This isn't fringe theories I'm quoting. This guy did this in the 80s and 90s. Why haven't we heard about this? Because it doesn't fit the narrative. Because it looks like it's been constructed over at least 1,000 years according to these dates. Not what Gnostic and Flint Dibble are saying, 200 years older because of the charcoal and the wood. 1,000 to 1,300 years based on the top leading archaeologists in Egyptian field study.
At the same time, there's a big range, and this is something I want to point out. Radiocarbon dates give a range, okay?
Like we just saw that range, 1,000, 1,300 years. And these guys are showing 200 years.
And this is especially true when you're taking kind of 20 dates from one context, like the Great Pyramid.
As I showed you here, large range of dates, but not in between the 200 years that these guys are claiming.
Peer-reviewed paper right there. That's what I'm citing.
People
All
really
I'm
hated
saying
that I
is
said that.
I really hate that you said that because it shows that you have no idea what you were citing. Because you were citing this paper right here, which I've gone through in my last breakdown video of this debate and a few shorts I put out. It shows me that he has no idea what the hell he was citing, or Flint told him to cite this deliberately to misrepresent the data that he was giving him, because he cited this as evidence from 10 PhDs that said that the mortar from the stones in the core of the pyramid were dated to Khufu's reign. This does not say that. So he was citing another study while saying it was coming from this study. That is misrepresenting the evidence. So this is where all the evidence comes from in this study that he was supposed to cite. It's in the first table. All Flint had to do was click table number 1 and this would come up. But he didn't want to do that because it would show that none of the carbon dates that they pulled in the study he was telling Gnostic to cite come from the Great Pyramid at all. It comes from bone, textile, linen, plant remains, and papyrus, from nowhere near the Great Pyramid. And in this study, as I showed in my previous video, I'll show a clip, this study cited another study which said this: the ancient Egyptian pyramids at Giza have never been accurately dated. Boom.
When you say
This is the paper you're talking about. I was the one that actually shared this paper with you before the debate.
There you have it. Flint said it right from his own mouth. He was the one that gave Gnostic this paper. That's not the only thing you gave him though as well.
This is the one I gave you.
Yeah, that's the one you gave me. I screenshot it from your video.
So he also gave him another slide about the sarcophagus being too big in the Great Pyramid, in the King's Chamber. And he's trying to use that as evidence that it's a sarcophagus because they had to build around it. Even Matt Beall said that doesn't prove it's a sarcophagus because you couldn't get it up the ascending passageway. Yeah, no one's saying they didn't build around it. No one's saying that. So it doesn't prove it's a sarcophagus because of this. So if Flint's giving him this, he's giving him terrible data.
You're correct. He is not. Let's go in.
Only
Pull up
for
the
the
paper,
wood.
man.
It's only for the wood. I know
I
What
was
do you
wrong
think?
about
What
that.
do you
though.
think?
That only
You
for
are
the-
wrong about the only for the wood part, yeah.
Honestly. So it's okay if Gnostic's wrong about that, but we'll see how they treat Dan when he gets something wrong.
Part, yeah.
The reason why I have terminus post quem there is because even if you wanted to say, oh, but the wood goes back another 100 to 200 years, you still have to deal with the other
Well, I'm wrong about this, is what you're saying.
Oh my God, yes, you're wrong about it. He's giving you information to cite from a paper that says nothing about what you're saying right now. He's deliberately giving you something to misrepresent the evidence. You're a useful idiot going along with it because you have no idea what the hell you're talking about.
You're wrong about this. That's actually not what I'm playing. I want to get something else.
I legitimately thought, just for anyone who's wondering, I legitimately thought that other material was dated and only the wood was off. That's why I'm saying this. It's not me being. This is literally what I thought. This is what I thought.
So, okay, if you want to take him at face value, he didn't know. He just genuinely thought this is the way they dated it. That's okay. But do they say the same thing about Dan DeDunking when he gets something, quote, wrong that he genuinely thought was correct? No, let's see how they treat him.
You are just like a fucking liar. You are just a clown who is just making up stuff as you go and being confidently wrong.
This is literally what I thought. This is what I thought.
So he's saying he got it wrong and he doesn't know what he's talking about. So then that would mean
he's literally talking out of his ass right now.
Yeah, you said it. This paper you're citing does not say what you're saying it does. The evidence does not come from where you're saying it comes from. Completely misrepresenting the data. Because this is the one you were citing that says what you were talking about. A completely different study that Flint gave you. I don't know if Flint gave it to him deliberately. I'm not saying he did. I'm saying it's very fishy that Flint would give him this information from a completely different study about the charcoal in the mortar and then give him this paper to cite that information. Or Gnostic used this information not knowing that it was a different study. Either way, it was misrepresented.
He's completely wrong about this. He's completely lying and making this up.
So Gnostic was completely wrong. Now, I don't know if he was completely lying and making it up, or he just absolutely got it wrong because he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't understand the data. In Gnostic's own words, he either didn't understand the data or he was lying.
Couple things. One, I got something wrong. They did charcoal, not ash.
Flint got something wrong. So the archaeologist is telling everyone he knows everything and here's how it all works. And you're a pseudoscientist if you get anything wrong. Well, you got it wrong because they don't date ash, they date charcoal. And someone else who's an expert who commented on his channel said, that's not how that works. You got it wrong. But that's okay when they get things wrong. And then what do? They cite the abstract of the paper instead of going to this table right here. If you click on this table right here, figure number 1 is this figure right here. You got to think, why didn't they click on the figure 1 and bring it up on their stream to show everyone here's the data that we were citing? That has nothing to do with the pyramids. But don't worry because they tell on themselves after.
What we know about Egyptian chronology, it locks in synchronisms. We use Egyptian material culture because it has the Great Kings list and it's well understood.
The chronologies of this period have been reconstructed from surviving lists of kings and the lengths of their reigns, but the lists are seldom complete and contain known inconsistencies and errors. The existing chronologies for that period, the Old Kingdom, can be considered accurate only to about 100 plus or minus years, a figure that radiocarbon dating cannot at present improve.
Offsets between the two can be as great as a century. That's why this paper is not about the pyramids. This paper is about resolving the high versus low debate for Old and Middle Kingdom Egypt.
But hang on, Gnostic used it to cite the stone in the pyramids. Look, he wrote it there. This is the writing that Gnostic wrote. Carbon dating of organic material found within the mortar and associated worker camp. This is bullshit right here. He wrote that next to that, not knowing what this paper said at all. He just read the abstract.
That's why this paper is not about the pyramids. This paper is about resolving the high versus low debate for Old and Middle Kingdom Egypt.
The organic material is in the mortar, and the mortar goes all the way down to the bottom layers of the pyramid, in the core of the pyramid. And that mortar carbon dates to exactly the reign of Khufu. Peer-reviewed paper right there. That's what I'm citing.
He just said he was citing this peer-reviewed paper that has nothing to do with what he said it is. That's called misrepresenting the evidence, or it's called gaslighting if he knowingly did it, and we know he's done that before. This is how he treats Dan, but it says more about Gnostic himself than anything else.
I know exactly how they dated it. I know exactly what their methods were. I know exactly what the data was. And I'm just like, I'm sitting there going, I'm rolling my eyes going, yeah, right, dude.
That's exactly what I could say to him. Yeah, right, dude. You're citing something you don't know anything about because this dude below you gave you this source and you're misrepresenting it.
For the record, I made a huge mistake with this paper.
Why? Why did you make a huge mistake? And thank you for admitting you made a huge mistake with this paper, but he's only saying it was because of the charcoal and the ash and the wood, not because it doesn't say anything about the pyramids. So why did he actually make a huge mistake?
Nothing to do with the pyramids.
That's why.
All these lines, the black ones are the radiocarbon dates, came out in the 90s when they first started discussing this. Why might we be getting just wood dates that are older than our historical dates? Oh, maybe this is old wood.
See how archaeology is doing this? Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. The dating could be this, the dating could be that. Maybe. It's all speculation. Where have we heard that before? Yeah. We're all speculating and hypothesizing. Not, let's take a look at the evidence from Mark Lehner, which I showed you, which gives you like 1,000-year range Why don't they bring that up?
You can only date to when the tree died.
No, you date when
No?
the tree grew.
Oh, okay.
Abstract we just read mentioned that the issue is only 100 years off.
Because I read that. Yeah.
But you didn't pull up the data, either did Flint. And if you look at table 2 in that data set, it says about the wood, it comes from Sudan. And then I even went and looked into it myself about this wood, and I found out that they pulled some wood out of the Queen's Chamber, and the University of Aberdeen dated it to 3341 3094 BC, 5 to 800 years older than when Khufu was supposed to have built it.
I'm not a radiocarbon person, but I teach this stuff.
You're not a radiocarbon person, but you teach it. So what does that mean? You don't know what you're doing and you're still teaching about it, or you're not into that subject but you're still teaching about it?
I'm sorry, but the idea that Dan actually thinks that what's going on in this paper is scholars massaging data on purpose to make a narrative is beyond my comprehension of how you can actually come up with that.
He's just willfully ignorant and confidently wrong. And he misrepresents it. Your paper that you showed had nothing to do with the pyramid.
It wasn't scholars massaging the data. It was you misrepresenting it, while Flint knowingly gave it to you to misrepresent, or you just didn't know what you were citing. So you were misrepresenting data either knowingly or unknowingly. Okay, you were misrepresenting it because you said
the mortar goes all the way down to the bottom layers of the pyramid, in the core of the pyramid.
In the core of the pyramid. And what is Flint gonna say?
And he misrepresents it. Your paper that you showed had nothing to do with the pyramid.
So Flint just said to Gnostic and everyone else, this paper that he gave him to cite says nothing about the pyramids. And Gnostic's sitting there going, hang on, I've just told everyone this paper cites the mortar from the core of the pyramids and the dating to Khufu. Look how he's sitting there going, oh my God, what have I done? I've misrepresented the data unknowingly or knowingly. Flint even said it has nothing to do with the pyramids. Now Gnostic's sitting there going, I look like a fucking idiot. Which, you have for a long time, man.
He just lied to my face and I took him for his word.
Yeah, Flint, I think, lied to your face and you took him for his word. He gave you data which you completely misrepresented.
You are just like a fucking liar. You are just a clown who is just making up stuff as you go and being confidently wrong.
When they're wrong, they can just, I was wrong, I'll cite the people with knowledge. When it's Dan who's wrong, this is how Flint responds. All right, that's how you want to be?
This problem exists all over Egypt, but it's been resolved now, or so it seems.
Or so it seems. No, it hasn't been. You're saying it has, or so it seems. No. Pull up the actual data. Stop misrepresenting this stuff.
You are just like a fucking liar.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of come off like that after watching this interview with Gnostic or this breakdown with Gnostic. It's your words.
Yeah, I should have caught that. You're right. I should have caught that after reading that paper.
You should have caught that the information you were actually citing was from a separate study that Flint gave you, not the one you were citing on the podcast that Flint also gave you. And now everyone can see that you were misrepresenting that data. Again, and you're openly saying that you didn't know what you were talking about. You weren't well prepared.
I was a little more prepared on this section. I'm not going to lie.
I think you did a good job.
I'm glad that I'm learning this now, though. So
they lack standards, they lack integrity, they lack honesty, and they're mostly just rude people.
I think you're talking about yourself there based on what I've just shown.
Many of these other crowd, like Jimmy and Dan in particular, are the worst. They are. Jay's pretty bad too. They just. Look, they're just rude, nasty, lying individuals.
Yes, and yes. That's on all accounts. That is exactly what you've shown me that you are in this conversation with Gnostic.
You have all these strong opinions, but then you admit that you're not an expert, that you don't know. But if you don't know shit, why are you having such strong opinions on scholars being wrong and holding up this narrative? But then you accept all these people that come in front of you and stand in front of your face with no credentials. They just tell you, everyone's wrong except for me.
They're talking about Jimmy and Dan DeDunking and all these pseudo people that they want to say. But what they're actually doing is talking about themselves, because that's exactly what he did on the debate. And then he's going to talk about Matt Beall asked him if he's okay talking about the Younger Dryas, because it does actually have implications on what they were talking about with Egypt. Because as I showed in my previous video on the breakdown, the Sphinx dating with the Sphinx enclosure does have implications with the Younger Dryas. As we look at with the evidence from Dr. Robert Schoch, geologist and geophysicist, who brought this to our attention in the 90s. The vertical fissures and rounded edges in the Sphinx enclosure gives us a date that could be pushed back to the end of the Ice Age, which is 9600 BC, 11,600 years ago, at the end of the Younger Dryas. So yes, it is relevant. And Gnostic What did he just say? People, they're not experts, but they just talk shit. And that's exactly what he's going to do on the Younger Dryas.
You're right with if we talk about Younger Dryas and a whole bunch, we'll have a back and forth. And I was like, at first I said, well, that has nothing to do with my Egyptian theory at all. Like, I don't know what this has to do with anything. He said, oh, I think it's definitely related. We have to talk about. I was like, all right, listen, it's your channel. Fine. We started talking about Younger Dryas, and none of us there have any fucking clue what we're talking about.
But what did you just say about other people who have strong opinions but don't know what they're talking about?
You have all these strong opinions, but then you admit that you're not an expert, that you don't know.
Like I said, my understanding is from the science is actually it works pretty well just with natural climate change. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and act like an expert in this field at all, but
I'm just going to show a couple of clips from my previous video where I talked about the key points in the Younger Dryas and how it relates to a cataclysm that happened at the end of the last ice age. Scientific Journal says 12,850 years ago, onset of the Younger Dryas. This broad range of evidence is more readily explained by catastrophic processes triggered by a cosmic impact with Earth. Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Essentially catastrophic.
And when I brought up the older Dryas, they were just like, well, I don't know.
So here's another clip that describes what happened during the older Dryas and the differences between the Younger Dryas and the older Dryas. The last major glacial period had experienced some 25 short-term climate alternations, but the Younger Dryas differed from them not only in timing but also in behavior. Now look what he's going to say here. This is the worst. Absolutely the worst. The biggest gaslighting of all time. This is so bad.
They ended up saying maybe there were two comets.
He said they ended up saying maybe there was two comets, and Flint's laughing at it as if they brought it up, Dan and Matt Beall. Let's take a look at what actually happened.
Like, really? Now we're going with two comets? Okay.
there's an older Dryas right before this period from 18,000 BC to 14,000 BC. So was there another comet then?
You motherfucker. You're the one that brought up if there was two comets because of the older Dryas. And then he's sitting there with Flint Dibble saying they brought up that there was two comets. Now we're going to say there was two comets. You're the one that said it. Like, how clear can this be? He is a straight up liar, misrepresenting the facts, misrepresenting the evidence, misrepresenting his own words. Lie, lie, lie. That's who he is. If anyone has him on a podcast after this to talk about any of this stuff, you're an idiot.
They ended up saying maybe there were two comets.
So was there another comet then?
Neil did his homework on the pyramids
He didn't do his homework on anything.
to be able to talk about the pyramids, which is what you do when you prepare for a debate. You do your homework, right?
People
This
use
is what I
that
tell my
against you.
students.
People use that
Yeah.
against you. You're appealing to the consensus. That's what we're supposed to do.
You always have to follow the evidence wherever it goes.
That's Robert Schoch on Joe Rogan in my last video, that clip. What did he say? You always have to follow the evidence wherever it goes. Okay, not just evidence you like, which they were talking about. Don't just follow it because these dates align with you and these dates don't. Okay, follow the evidence wherever it goes. But when you don't know the evidence, and you even claim you don't know the evidence, but you still sit there and spew nonsense about, oh, maybe there was two comets, and then lie about them saying they brought up that there was two comets. That's not following the evidence wherever it goes. That is lying and misrepresenting every single thing you are supposed to be talking about.
People are not interested in substance. They're interested in sound bites, and that
We're
works.
interested in the narrative, not the data.
They're talking about themselves again. Gnostic is interested in the narrative and not the data, because the data says something other than what he has any idea it says. So he quotes something that has nothing to do with what he's actually talking about.
This is okay. So they accept the carbon dating for Göbekli Tepe because they like the answer. But why isn't the carbon dating for the pyramids good to them?
I could ask the same thing. Bring up Mark Lehner's carbon dating that shows you 1,000 to 1,300 years of range between the carbon dates in the Great Pyramid. Do you want to go wherever the evidence goes? Or do you just want to keep promoting a narrative? And we know what he wants. We know what Flint Dibble wants. They're trying to keep promoting this narrative rather than go with wherever the evidence goes. This gets into the Mirror Papyrus, which I only have an issue with Gnostic misrepresenting what he was saying on the podcast. If you want to get into, does it say pyramid? I'm not saying what it says here. I'm just saying whatever Gnostic said in the podcast is different from what he's saying right now.
There's absolutely no documentation of any kind describing how the pyramids were constructed. Again, there's missing history.
The Papyri Wadi El Jarf documents how they were constructed.
Flint said the Papyri of Wadi El Jar, which is the Mirror Papyrus, which we talked about and looked at on the podcast and on the breakdown. He says it talks about how they're being constructed. Let's look at what Gnostic actually said in the debate.
It doesn't tell you how they lifted the blocks on the pyramid or how they constructed the pyramid.
Gnostic just said in the debate that Papyrus does not talk about how it was constructed. That is at odds with what Flint is saying here. It tells you how it's constructed. So if Flint is telling him before the debate all this information, he clearly didn't tell him that the Papyrus doesn't say how it was constructed, or he did tell him, and Gnostic was lying and misrepresenting the data again. And now look how Gnostic was going to try and backpedal out of this one.
Bringing blocks to the pyramid is describing how it's being constructed.
It doesn't tell you how they lifted the blocks or how they constructed the pyramid.
So on one hand, again, as I've shown, he's saying on the debate, it doesn't say how they're being constructed. But when he's sitting with Flint Dibble on his show, he's saying taking the blocks to the pyramid is saying it's talking about how they're constructed. That's not the same thing as talking about how they're building it, how they're constructing it. That just says they're transporting the limestone from the quarry to the pyramid or to the horizon of Khufu, what it's called, the Mer. Okay? It doesn't say how they're constructed. You even said that in the debate, but now you want to change your story? Which one is it?
And the thing is we have lots of different sources of evidence for how the pyramid was constructed. We have the tools that they used. We have the ramps that are going there. We have tons of stuff that give us a sense. Now, there's debate over the layout of the various ramps. There's debates over some various specific...
Yeah, what did Graham Hancock say in the breakdown when I showed on Joe Rogan? If they had a ramp to haul the granite stones up to the King's Chamber, you would need, quote, a fucking long ramp. And that ramp should still be there. That's what Graham Hancock said, okay? It is not there. The only ramps that we saw at Saqqara with a tiny unfinished pyramid. So no, if he's talking about the Great Pyramid, we do not have that. And we do not have the tools that they would have used to cut the gigantic 50 to 80 ton granite blocks for the King's Chamber. We do not have the tools for that.
In terms of like broad brush strokes, we have some sense over how the pyramids were constructed.
We have some sense how they were constructed. Broad brush strokes. No, give me the fucking data. There's no tools. There's no ramp. Now this last bit is absolutely hilarious because Flint Dibble is an archaeologist and yeah, he deals with ancient Greek stuff in archaeology as well. But Gnostic Informant has based his whole channel with like over 300,000 subscribers, based his whole channel on knowing ancient Greek texts and communicating ancient Greek esoteric knowledge through the actual ancient Greek text. But no, he does it a lot in English because he can't read ancient Greek. This is hilarious that an archaeologist is going to correct Gnostic Informant whose whole YouTube life has been based around ancient Greek.
Like, you know,
It's not, modern Greek isn't exactly the same as ancient Greek, but most people who speak modern Greek can read ancient Greek and understand a lot.
well, it's fairly different. If they read Katha it's a way that makes modern Greek and ancient Greek more similar to one another. Then yes, or if they've been learned ancient Greek. But ancient Greek and modern Greek, while there's a lot of overlap in vocabulary, they're very different grammatically. And,
of course. It'd be like us trying to read like old English from like the
like Beowulf or something like that.
Hang on, look how he changes his position as soon as he gets caught out, so he doesn't look stupid. Well, he does look stupid, but most people who speak modern Greek can read and understand ancient Greek. That's what he said. But when he gets told by an archaeologist that modern Greek and ancient Greek are very different grammatically, oh yeah. Hang on, you just said most people who read modern can read and understand ancient. And you just got called out by an archaeologist that said that's not true. And then you backpedal and say, oh yeah, no. You suck. Your whole channel's been based on this. You worked with Armin Hillman, PhD in classics, who knows ancient Greek better than anyone I've ever seen. You turn your back on him, and it shows how bad you are with ancient Greek if an archaeologist can shut you down about bullshit you're talking about ancient Greek. You suck.